All right, welcome. Here we are again, and we have Nas and Asif for another iteration of ay 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 AI. Welcome, welcome. Um, we did it good the first time, and so good that we have to do it again. And so we're gonna go more into AI today, more in depth into you know what are the areas that people struggle with, and how do we find the middle ground, and who's out there solving these questions. So again, Nas, thank you for being here. You have the
Well,
mic, my friend.
yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for having me again. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. I think the amount of wealth of knowledge that both of you exhibit, I think it's important for listeners to get, I guess, ramped up rather on the concept of what AI is. And again, it's a great day to be with you all. Absolutely, it's a great day.
And that's you know we've been spending a whole lot of time together because we're creating a process because we have found the people. And me and Lucky, if we know one thing that we preach and one thing we believe in is people. Technology, it comes and goes, but people is what we believe in. So me and Lucky will just go over and over: people, process, technology; people, process, solution; people, process, whatever it comes after the process, we'll figure it out as long as we're the right people in place. So me and you have been spending a lot of time, and we've created something that is just unfathomable at this point. We just There's so much potential behind it, but what we've done so far is unfathomable, and I'm really excited about what we're working on. And thank you so much for making the time on Sunday morning for.
Ay, 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 ay. There you go. No, that's fantastic. I certainly appreciate again, as I said. I mean, pleasure to be here, especially talk about this topic, and then obviously your the way you put it. I think it's eloquent in terms of people, process, technology. People have to come first. Again, if you look at state of affairs, if you will, around the globe in terms of the advent of generative AI, everybody's at a loss. They're thinking about how do you move forward from where we are today. And obviously, pandemic accelerated this sort of innovation to where we are today. And it hasn't given much time to sort of the mid tier to what I call senior executives to really get underneath it to understand what are the implications? How do you roll this out into the ecosystem of an organization, complex systems? And then, most importantly, as you said, is how do you bring the current workforce up to snuff in terms of getting this in the order? So there's again, coming from Davos convention last week, it's apparent where the focus is going to be for the coming years, and I rightly so at the top is the upskilling, and that is very very much needed. Um, as I think we were talking prior to recording is as I mentioned, a good friend of mine who's my mentor, he says a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? So how do you solve that problem? How do you get over that and get people not only upskilled but excited about the change, because every change obviously has good, bad, or the ugly. I mean, it's got both sides. So how do you equalize that? And how do you kind of move forward from where we are? So again, good to be here. Good to certainly take this topic further and have a conversation.
Yeah, I
It's
think that's the
you
same
have
friend
some.
that said Dutch ain't if it ain't Dutch, it ain't much, right? So we're gonna have to make some introduction, but before we do that, go ahead, Lucky.
No, no, I'm with Nas. It's just the fact is that he's right. AI just exploded, and before people could even try to figure out what AI is, it's morphed and it's changed and it morphed again. And then before they can get a finger on it again, it's changed again, and it's a moving target now. And anyone that doesn't speak AI, they're going to get lost in the wash really quick. And we've talked about, what is it. So yeah, definitely, what we can let us know, us, the audience, start to develop. What are the separations? What generative I just jumped in everyone's face, and so that's kind of the big conversation. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And coming sort of or addressing the sort of big elephant, right? Is how to get people upskilled, and it starts with education. There's myriads of online classes and schools, and there's in-house training, there's outsourced training that organizations can leverage to upskill people. But at the fundamental level, you as a C level executive have to take an inventory of the skill sets that you have available. Reason I say that is there's two school of thoughts. If you look at sort of the fast pace or accelerated deployment of generative AI versus what legacy understanding of AI is, there's a disconnect, right? There's a disconnect. Is you have this old school legacy thought process. Oh, if we need to interact with AI, we need people that not only understand but develop codes and do this, that, and the other. The reason I say that is I say that loosely about old school is because things have shifted so fast that it's hard to fathom in terms of where we are today, because that old school of thought is no longer relevant in terms of how do you interact with generative AI. You don't need to be a coder. You don't need to be able to, do any data science for that matter. You just need to be able to have a conversation like we're having conversations. Lucky is good at something. I'm going to ask Lucky specific questions within his domain. It's going to give me answer. Now take that and multiply it. Lucky is good at encyclopedia. Now you can ask anything about with an encyclopedia to Lucky, and Lucky will answer that. Take that two steps further. Lucky knows everything about the world that exists today. So you ask Lucky all the question within the world, Lucky's going to answer that. And now we get into the realm of universe, and that is where generative AI is we live in that universe where generative AI is everywhere. It's penetrated ecosystem of every nook and cranny where the data sat or sits. So now you can ask, I mean, it crawls web, it goes, behind sort of firewalls to look at the data. And you can ask, right, is, hey, tell me about this. And you can have a human like conversation with it, right? NLP style. So, that old school of thought versus, this sort of modernized, there's a big disconnect. So first thing is as a C-level executive, is how do you bridge the gap? How do you bring everybody on sort of what I call the single pane of glass or same sheet of music? That's going to be the challenging part, right? Is because you guys have heard sort of nomenclature about you can't teach an old dog a new trick. So there's a growing generation, right? That is at sort of the fringes of the exit, if you will, that are about to leave the workforce. But then you have this new millennials that are coming in. So the gap is like there's no mid tier left. So how do you have a continuity? That's going to be a challenge. You have this sort of, as I said, the senior executive that have gone through the ranks, and there's no mid tier. Now you have these younger generations coming in. Is so how do you fit that? How do you kind of complete that gap, and then also at the same time and have give them understanding of what generative AI is and how that can be leveraged. And the other thing is as we were talking earlier before recording, is there's no single app out there that says, "Hey, I am the AI app." You have these bots or you have these models that are working on the back of the data or on top of the data, but there's no app per se. Like as I mentioned earlier, there's no AI CRM. There's no generative AI ERP, right?
Yeah.
So how do you introduce that, right, to the ecosystem that an organization has or have, and how do you take all of this AI sort of tool set or tool chest to then improve efficiency and performance within the organization and optimize for cost. So there's a lot of things that a C-level executive will have to figure out. But at the at the top is you need to start, and it goes back to again, a fool with a tool is still a fool. Is now let's start educating people, and that brings home the same concept that Asi was talking about is training and upskilling. So you got to start there. You got to start to let people know what this is. You know, this is how you kind of start taking first step to learn and then go from there.
Uh, where you start is definitely where you are able to indicate how far you will go and where you will end up in 5 years, right? So I always call it a life cycle. In that life cycle, not everybody will end up where they want to be, right? So we always talk about putting gas in the car and just driving until you get to where you want to go, right? But if you where you want to go is not an address, but rather just somewhere random, it's a decision, it's a choice that you make, and that's no different from AI machine learning. As in, what do you want out of an AI? How do you develop it, and how do you have it perform, and how do you monitor, how do you trigger it to a point that it's able to do exactly what you need it to do for your business purposes, requires really lots of thinking, right? So it's kind of like, yeah, you got a car full of gas, I mean car with a lot of gas in it, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should just leave right away, right? So there's that. This conversation has been very difficult for the last 5 years, to say the least. Difficult as in, first of all, we talked about data so much that everybody just got tired of data. Data conversation was so halting. It is still halting. And the other piece of it is that now you have to step back a little bit and actually understand your business process, not just from data perspective, as in, how does my business create that ROD, return on data? Right? That return on data means I have to think about it from another perspective. As in data acquisition, big data, these were just, something that we didn't really think about very much at first, but once we did, we put a lot of efforts into it. And once we did, we said, that's big data. We have tons of those. And when we said you need more data, it became almost halting in conversations. And like, I always say, like, literally people told me to walk out the room. Just, there's a door, get out, right?
Oh, I
And that was natural. That would be natural in my part because you put so
yeah.
much effort into data, and here's this one guy coming and telling me you need more data, and obviously the reaction is like, get out of here. We can't do all these, right? But if you start thinking about it from the perspective of AI, now there's another challenge, right? You have created that data culture for so long. How do you create that AI culture? Culture of people that are engaged in this AI conversation with the understanding of what they already have, which is that data, right? Now, how do you bring that data and AI together? With Gen AI, that conversation has taken off like a rocket, and there's no slowing it down anymore, right?
Mhm.
So we used to have the luxury of telling people like, slow down, step back a little bit, start training, start thinking, start understanding what sort of decision would you like to make, and how that decision ends up in the 5 year life cycle at the end of the 5 year. So upskilling piece that you're mentioning, a lot of companies have already gone through it. That's still not enough. As in, they haven't really upskilled everybody in the organization to a point that everybody can not only feel comfortable, but start using it and making an impact with being comfortable and being a comfortable user that can make an impact. So I want to go back to cybersecurity here, right? No matter how much money and how many tools and how many whatever we did, at the end we realized that we don't have good users who can stop this hacking, who can stop this attack, who can turn this. And I'm kind of hesitant to just say it. Just even last week, we had a hack from the spray that caused all sorts of issue in one of the top company. I'm not gonna say no name, not dropping no name. It was heartbreaking to see how that could happen. Just people that are even professionals, right? They're trained, they're upskilled to the point that they are the one that's talking about everybody needs to be upskilled, right? So when you're talking about cybersecurity, you look at the end users. Literally, I think cybersecurity is the point where end users are the only one left to create this ecosystem of secure cyber world, right? Um, Having said that, now you take that into the AI side of things, we really need to start from that side. We really cannot afford to have AI that we develop and let the end user figure out how to interact with that. We have to start with the people. We have to start with that endpoint users to get them to say, we will develop this AI ourselves as this AI grows in capabilities. Because we have the intent, we have the opportunity, now we're going to grow it as a capability, right? I'm just going to stop right there because I know Lucky has a
Yeah.
lot of thoughts into it because the cybersecurity is very near dear to all three of our hearts.
Well, a lot of thoughts there. You know, with security, you there's different layers, of the onion. But when it comes to AI, the big thing that comes to mind, and just so we can help people understand, just to make it, try to break it down in plain English, is okay. For the executives, C-level guys, the investment for a generative AI solution, depending, because they're getting Microsoft released just another offering that says, hey guys, instead of using the centralized GPT, whatever, 3, 4 that everyone's digging into, and the big pot of GPT that everyone's using, we can customize abstractions where you have your own GPT, and they're selling it now as an offering, and that's where I I think security starts with AI. But the big thing is the relatively low investment to get into generative AI. It really is just teaching the culture. But the other side of it that you talked about, that we've been talking about for years, is the ugly side of AI. The one that no one ever wanted to deal with back in the day. When you wanted to deal with data, you had to find the guys that are like the data mongers, the geeks, and that guys will help you understand your data and then give you a report. They're just used to just whatever happens, give me a report. That that area of AI development where AI can help transform how you look at your business. That's the difficult portion that when we talked about for years before AI exploded, we had an AI, we were doing this podcast and we would talk about AI, and the conversations were not AI generative AI at all. It exploded and it just became now the leading topic. But that being said, you can jump into AI in different fashions, and I think that's where people need to understand the separation. There's there's different ways, different models. AI can help you in different ways, but what is that? How again? You I'm echoing what you guys said is how can AI fit your model, your organization, and then you start to kind of feel out. But generative AI has been a real way, an easy way to kind of bring it into your organization and start to take advantages of what AI is. But now it's easier to take advantage. Where before the conversations were boring. I'll be honest with you. They were hard to have. They're like drinking sand. You know, okay, AI will work for you, but maybe not. It all depends on how much time and effort and you put into it that you get out of it. And now you don't have to put that time and effort into it. Now you just take advantage of a service. And now that's the difference. Where before it was okay, do I have to hire a decision scientist, a data scientist? I have to hire all these guys to start to make up a team where now generative AI is right there. You can just click it now and get to it. And that's a huge, huge market now, for people to take advantage in the your business. That if you're not using it, you're behind. And so I think what you guys are doing is fantastic, helping people understand that area. But when it comes to security, my area is this. I don't want to share my inputs with anyone else's inputs. And that's where if they can create the abstractions, which I think that's what they're doing now. Microsoft, you guys saw the new offering from Microsoft, right? Where they're able to now give you an AI that's only for your organization now. And it's an offering, like a SaaS. That was last week, I believe. And
Yeah.
that's what I've been wanting, Give me my 3-year-old AI large language model, and we can kind of start to teach it our policies, our processes, our how we do business. And that's where security starts for me. Now, there's other layers of security. I guess it's an onion, but AI and being able to separate that, I think is huge. And so I'll leave it there. What do you guys see with Microsoft, or do you see other guys in the same space, or you let me know?
Yeah. No, interesting thought process there. Like, matter of fact, I mean, I'm curious since this is your sort of domain as well in terms of security, and I'm an astute learner in that sense. Is how do you one of the thing that you've noticed within the realm of generative AI that Asif and I kind of discussed is hallucination, right? How do you like if you take that into account And if you have your, you know, sort of quote unquote security firewalls, but they're built based off of hallucination, how do you address that? I mean, nobody has thought about it, right? I mean, so the other piece is if you take the hallucination, you pair that with RAG, and you build your security firewalls with those rules that are implemented through that permutation. What if everything is false? How do you address that, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of complexities in terms of how the security realm will unfold within generative AI. Um, but it's a journey, and we're all going to learn along the way, right? I mean, there's no silver bullet today. But again, I mean, I've had interactions with a few folks within the domain of particularly in cybersecurity realm. I mean, obviously you too as well. But I'd be curious if there's an answer to that. Is like, how do you take a firewall that was built on this hallucination, right, that you got, and now all of a sudden you have the exposure that you can't recover from. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I tried to explain that to a few people, executives, because we're trying to build our definition of what AI is, and the first one is, well, AI is all generative, right? And that was the big that for some reason all of AI just fell into a bucket now, and it was all generative. And this is the thing for me: is where is your data? Is it your data that they're building the model off of? Is it someone else's data that they trained the model with that happens to fit your, what you're doing? Is that, and who owns that data? And that's where security also is, because that's the liability. Who's liable for the data? Where is it? Because at the end, no matter whose data is or where the data is, you're liable for your own data. And so with cloud, well, I'm not going to go too far into, but tick and the usage of the expansion of the usage of services in the cloud now, data and where it lies now, those lines are blurred. Before you could say, no, it's mine because
Right?
behind my little firewall,
That's right.
my
Yeah.
castle and moat,
Yeah.
and we have a LAN extension and we have a little secure link and all that's protected. No, no,
Yeah.
no, no. Forget all that. Erase
Yeah.
all that. Now the
Yeah.
cloud is just exploded that model.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's who owns the data, and that's the focus. I think if you want to take and develop models for AI, that's going to be your next is okay. Are we here or there, and who owns it?
Yeah.
And as you build your models, it's going to be important because people are going to say, no, 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 it's already built. The thing already does its thing. All we got to do is just start using it. All right. Well,
Mhm.
you don't own that data. You don't know how it was trained. You're just
That's right.
a consumer somehow, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
or the other side of it. So
Yeah.
data is
It,
one of those things you have to define. But I'll leave it that at that.
yeah, and nothing much have changed since everything has changed. And I mean it with some lightheartedness because it's really difficult to understand that little slither of changes that has happened and how that made all the difference, right? Because with generative AI, what you're seeing is what people assumed will happen in the future. That inference that came into the play, that everybody said, well, you trained the model, but the inference really sucks. And I mean it honestly, it is really still bad,
It's
but
not
it's
there.
far better than what it used to be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The model that was trained on the other side of the neural network, now you're seeing the other side of the neural network that is efficient enough for you to interact with, right? And that's the difference. That model training hasn't gone away anywhere yet. It wouldn't, not for a while, but it will eventually will disappear. And what I mean by that, you have the supervised learning, which is a 65% of the need for years to come. And then you have unsupervised learning, which is growing slowly. And then you have reinforcement learning that is a little slither of like about maybe 5% of all the use cases. So if you look at the data, the model that is being trained has been in training for a long time. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. So you'd still have to go through the same of what used to be that was the hard part. Nobody saw the inference, so nobody cared what the model was trained on. Because the model that was trained, inference always didn't really pan out to the level of, say, return on data or return on investment. Because we just talked about cybersecurity, we're kind of delving into the finance side of things, right? How much does it cost to train a model? And when the inference comes out, how do I know that whatever money I put in was it worth it, right? Because at the end of the life cycle, you want to see something you can deploy, not necessarily shelve it because the money ran out, right? So you have cybersecurity concern, first of all. You have money concern. You have this data concern, right? And on top of that, you have cloud concern, as in who wants that data? Where is that data coming from? Because that's what Lucky's talking about, right? My data, your data. How do we keep track of all the data, right? And then when I do use that data, and I'll give you one quick example. If somebody hand wrote something and you're able to use the OCR to take that image and turn that into your data, now that your model is trained on that data, who owns that data? Is it the person who hand wrote it, or somebody who OCR'd it, or somebody who trained on it, or somebody who's using it? And how do I take it to the legal criminal, not criminal, but procedure trial? How do we determine all these? It hasn't been answered yet, and it's still going on with ChatGPT today, right? So,
Yeah.
having said that, I think a lot has changed, but very little has changed, right? You still have to go through that pain process, and the best part of it, with what Lucky said earlier, Microsoft give you 80% of it. That 20%, if you think it's bad, you should think about it from scratch, right? Microsoft has done the hard work for you. Now it's up to you as an organization, as a C suite, to decide that 20%, where do I start and what do I want to end up in?
Yeah.
Because there is finance involved, cybersecurity involved, cloud involved, data involved. All of them cost money. All of them has, I guess, your stakeholder obligations that you have to meet, right? Because your stakeholder is not going to just let you do whatever you think is necessary. It's what makes sense financially for the company, right? So I'm just going to leave it at that because I think we're getting to the cloud portion of it, and that's where Nasir is the cloud guy.
Well, I mean, no, you bring up a very interesting point. Data sovereignty is a big topic. I mean, as we move forward, right? And couple that with obviously the security concerns, right? All of these domains are shared responsibility models. If you look at how cloud came into being, cloud, we can talk about SaaS, PaaS, all this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you don't get yourself involved, you leave yourself at the mercy of the vendor that has developed it for you. And again, it's like me going to Home Depot, picking up a brick that I'm going to build a wall of my house. The strength of that brick or the material of that brick depends on what that vendor did, unless I do my own due diligence. So it's a shared responsibility model, right? I can take the brick, but then type of cement, the mixture, and how it's going to sort of build that wall for me. I have if I'm not involved, I mean I'm taking somebody else's word for it and face the consequences. So it is a shared responsibility model where obviously the users will have to be um, upskilled if they aren't already to make sure that they understand. Hey, look, this is not something you take off the shelf and just implement it. Although, to your point, Asif, Microsoft did 80% of the job. That's exactly why I said it's a shared responsibility model because that 20% rests on you. And then now you take all of this, sort of the security and data analytics, all of this. It has financial implications, right? Everything is tied to P&L. Everything is tied to ROI. So, in this sort of rapid pace of innovation within generative AI, how do you realize that? One of the things, again, why we exist as an action AI is you could look at the existing ecosystem and say, hey, okay, let me look at your end-to-end business processes and technologies that you have. But as a human, it's almost humanly impossible to penetrate into each nook and cranny, right? So number one question is, how do we use this sort of conversational engine called generative AI to penetrate into that data silos that you have and tell me what is it that I can learn from it, expose the vulnerabilities, right? And then from there, literally start to implement where you see an opportunity for two things. Period. What are those two things? Is operational efficiency, which obviously takes into account, if you think about it, all the governance around it, all the security parameters around it, right? So you have resilient operations, and then at the end of the day, ROI. So if I'm going to implement something, is what's my bottom line, right? And so if I'm taking a particular application, you guys heard about this whole thing when cloud came to be as serverless Kubernetes, right? It's going to be the same conversation with generative AI. Where can I ingest these conversational engines to then reduce my overhead on the third party apps that I no longer need, right? So that's where Oxygen AI comes into play. Say, hey, we're going to look at holistically from end to end, and we're going to tell you where are these things going to get implemented so that you can have operational efficiency and you have cost optimization. And it's going to be a big topic. I mean, I think we're going to have a lot of learning along the way, but this is going to be a sticking point.
Oh, good point. I didn't even think about the serverless containerized, you know, distribution of, that's yeah, wow. Absolutely right on that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
if I can, I think uh, we're we're talking about where we've been, right? Because that's where we are still. Right? What the stakeholders are not going to understand, what the C-suite will not see coming, and what rest of the enterprise will need to be really trained for, is the fact that the strategy of how to containerize. I'm not going to try to use that word again because I'm stuttering.
Containerized.
Containerized.
Containerize
Yeah.
your data in a silo that is all within your boundaries of control, not necessarily out on the internet. And what I'm getting at is the edge part of things, right? That edge is coming so fast, right? It's not necessarily something that even the C-suite can prepare for, because it will happen overnight. And I mean that by, as in, there's so much investment happening in this edge process side of things. It's just that important, because AI is almost useless if you have to process the data for AI way out of your environment. It's rather more impressive when it's processed within your environment, using your data, secured, never left the network, right? Stayed within your parameters. Let's call it local LAN, right? If it's in the edge, it's far more impressive, far more. It just makes sense financially because there's zero latency in that AI deliverable, right? So you're able to communicate with it. You're able to, do have a large language model with it, right? I mean, excuse me, you can have a chat with it with text, text to text, text to audio. All these are processed in house. It's happening because it's just how much data we have and how hard it is to have all these data uh, maintained in one central location, if not everywhere, right? And everywhere means you have edge AI that's coming down the pipeline, and within already that past that edge AI, we already talked about distributed AI, and that's too far out, right? But I don't know how to put that in the month and year perspective, because I don't know how long it would take to have the distributed AI happen. And where I'm going with that is that if we're talking about today and we're talking about the future, none of these things is within our grasp yet. But if we don't upskill the workforce, no matter what happens, we are just preparing to fail, because we're not preparing the most core piece of artificial intelligence, be it cybersecurity or whatever the case is. The users will still be the vulnerability, as in the endpoint user, your own employees, your own workforce, your customers, right? You have to upskill in a massive level so that way your endpoints are not as vulnerable as it was with cybersecurity. And it's still today, it is. And I mean that with all sincerity because, like, people that are subject matter experts, they're getting fooled because of how hard it is to keep up with cybersecurity. With AI, it's a whole nother level of keeping up, because there's AIs that are so deceptive, has so much misinformation. I always say that there's no information; it's just misinformation and disinformation, because nobody can agree what an information is, right? It's misinformation and disinformation. So AI is living in that information bubble of those two things. So you have to have an upskilled end user, anybody who's engaging with an AI, just like you would want that end user to be very educated in cybersecurity. Don't click on that link. Don't use password that is just so weak, and change your password frequently, right? It's happening to everybody. So with that in mind, right, as in today, what we have to do today is get our people on board with all these, the threats that are coming down the pipeline, the strengths that are coming in. How do we adopt the strength and make a risk management framework around the threat? How do we create an opportunity that says we can averse around it? We can, pivot towards the opportunity, whatever the case is, we need to start dialogue, we need to upskill. And who else can do it better than XGen AI? Right? So
There you
let's talk
go.
about the people. Who do we have in XGen AI that
Yeah.
can deliver these sort of upskilling? Tell us the roster. Like we have a roster of people, and I think top five guys. Like who are we? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, again, upskilling is a as you mentioned, is a crucial piece. Bringing the workforce up this to speed in terms of the concept and the whole 9 yard. In terms of roster of people that we have, I got a dear friend of mine, Terry Singh, who's a sort of, I mean, if you look him up, he goes around the world on webinars and seminars, and he's an avid speaker of AI, generative AI. He's a founder of a company called DeepCog that do a lot of the deep learning algorithm writings, um, and they also interface with consumer side of the house where they understand what their concerns are and try to pin some of the governance within the products that these manufacturers are building, which is a noble cause because nobody's doing it today. So he's at the forefront. I have another friend of mine who's actually who's going to be doing training within the Action AI for generative AI. He's a good friend of mine who's a double math major from MIT. He does a lot of the courses here around Dallas, and he's also visiting faculty in a couple of universities. And then again, we have other folks that are involved, and without naming anybody, obviously there's a ton of roster there. There's a ton of people there. There's a huge sort of what I call a solid pipeline of resources that we have to train the workforce. Um, but again, as I said, I mean, to your points earlier, it goes down back to the basics. Is we gotta first educate the executives that hey, what's coming, it's already here. It's not coming. It's already here.
Yeah.
So accept that fact, and then let's get you upskilled in a sense where let's get you in a room and tell you what this technology is, what are the implications to your role and to your organizations and to your customers, and then really start diving deep into, either how do you uplift or how do you build a roadmap, right? That's where Acts Gen AI comes in play. Is that we enable so the whole idea is I use a lame example for this. And I'm going to put it out there for our listeners as well as you walk into a restaurant that offers a buffet, right? You've gone to that restaurant a couple of times and you love their buffet. Well, if you've gone there, you know what's a good item. So before eating anything and filling your stomach up, you're going to go to the right, product there, pick it up, eat, and then you're going to have a great day. But somebody like us walks in who's never been to that buffet, you're going to try everything. By the time you get to the product that you really like, you're going to be full. You're going to be like, oh crap, right? So take that as an adjacent sort of similarity in terms of like not knowing what to do. You can spend a lot of time and resources to figure out what's best. By the time you get to the best, you have nothing left, right? So, or you're depleted of resources or revenue or whatever the case is. So to avoid that, that is why Action came to being is we're going to help you avoid that pitfall where by the time you get there, it's not like, oh crap, I don't have, I mean, I tested this, I tested this, I tested this. Now I don't have the funds or I don't have the resources. I'm out of business. We're going to help you avoid that to say, we're here to guide you. We're here to tell you what's good based on what the technology is, what the trends are, and what technology can uncover for you, both from, again, people, process, technology perspective, right? So that is why we exist. I mean, that's sort of the charter, right? So, let's see how it unfolds in the future, but that's the mission. We're mission. What I tell Asif, we're on the mission from God. You know.
Yeah.
Well,
You know
that go ahead.
what you're saying. We've been talking about this between me and Lucky. We've been talking about this for a while, so it
Mhm.
really feels good to actually do something. Talking is cheap. DMX, right? Talk cheap,
Yeah.
but to talk the talk and walk the walk. I mean, it's impossible to just talk the talk for long enough. You start walk the walk at one point or another.
Mhm.
And what I mean by walk the walk is that uh, Nas and myself, we've been developing products for AI machine learning for, I mean, close to, for me, it's 8+ years. For you, I think it's close to 20 some years. Um, it's it's sort of like this walk the walk of upskilling people is what the end result of all this product development has been. And lucky, here's my frustration all the time. You can develop a product all you want. If the users don't know how to use it.
Mhm.
First thing first, as a startup, you get the bad review because they don't know how to use it. You lost a customer because they won't give you a review. And if there was a referral need, you cannot even reach out to them because they don't like you. That's the pain of every single product I've developed. Sweat and tears that went into this development of the product. Just at the end, just to come to that single realization that my users are not educated in engaging with the product that I've developed, which should work beautifully if they just knew how to interact with it, right? And that disappointment has led us to the point of, yeah, we talk the talk about this user's experience all the time, and we have to understand how these users think, how these users are able to uh, take where they started from and really get into my product and really start enjoying it, right? That's a hard work. That's harder than actually developing a product itself because I have to educate that train. I have to educate that user base and have them really grow that AI solution. Because when it comes to software, you can say, "Well, your software is just not working," and somebody can go and fix that. But AI necessarily doesn't respond that way. AI is more about human feedback. There's a if you look at ChatGPT, RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback, super important concept. But even ChatGPT struggles with that because ChatGPT is like, well, even though we have a lot of inferences, a lot of prompt, a lot of discussions in ChatGPT, we don't really get a lot of the human feedback because most users don't care to give feedback, right? Having said that, this is the walk that I was talking about for a very long time. As in, we have to do more on this upskilling than product development because there's no point in product development if there's no user to use it, right? So I'm going to stop right there. Lucky heard that frustration, but I'm going to let Lucky finish the thought there.
No, no. You know, I've developed solutions like that. I the first time I put together my first data warehouse took me 18 months, and it was done. And then they said, well, the reporting, we can't, we don't understand the reporting. And I was like, it's crystal reports. You just, and for me it was easy. But at the end they couldn't use it, so it took me another 2-3 months of developing a report structure where they had automated little graphs, and whatever the focus were on the data, they got those data bits that they wanted. And it took some time, to go from developer hat to user engineering, because it's hard to be at both levels, but sometimes you got to fit all roles. But that being said, you have to be able to give the user something that they can use easily, and that's where generative AI has exploded. We've gone back to the same well, but it's gotten so easy to just get out and use it. From the stable diffusion, the art, to large language models and people thinking that they're alive, they're sentient. I went through the same thing. I was like, I got to see this, and we've had several podcasts on Lucky's testing out all the AI models, you know, and I run and you want to see how people are it's impressive, but how people are getting fooled into believing that these models are aware now, or they give the impression that
Yeah.
they're aware and they're alive. They've gone Johnny Five. They got struck by lightning. Johnny Five's alive. And you test the models enough, and you're like, oh, I get it. There's an algorithm there, and it does this, and then you start. But it's hard to get to that point.
Yeah.
But generative AI has made it easy for people to get, you know, relevant, and now it becomes relevant for all of us. So yeah, it's a scary world, but I'm glad you guys are there to help guide people like a lighthouse to what is right with AI. So thank you. I support Axe Gen AI, and guys, we need more people like you guys out there you know, on the mission, helping grow AI because this is, it, the best way to help things grow the right way, and say the right way without corporations or government skewing, the way things are going to be developed, is to have everyone be aware of what AI is and everyone take a role in developing it into the future. So, you guys are awesome, helping all of us.
Yeah, no, Lucky, appreciate the sentiment there and support. Absolutely. I mean, as I said, I sort of humorously say that. I mean, we're we're from mission from God, but really, I mean, this is, I think now more than ever, every one of us, it's on to us to embrace the learning culture. Um, we all heard sort of nomenclature, proverbs around, learning, right? I mean, it's inevitable. It's evolution. It's constant. But if you look at the pace of innovation and you add in the Moore's law in there, we have no choice but to embrace the learning. And then the other piece, about the product development, yes, there's going to be thousands, if not millions, products out there next coming, few months. That either raise a flag of saying, hey, we're generative AI, but an educated customer is a good customer, right? So that they can poke in and say, is this really an AI tool, or is this just kind of just wrapped around? And Jeff Bezos said it right, right? If you want to build product, look at what customers are saying, not the competition. So you want to bring in ingenuity, look at your customers, see what they're asking for. Um, and the customers, I mean, again, as I said, it's a sort of a bit of a vicious cycle as well. If the customers, call it average users, I mean, if they're not aware, then how do you create that awareness? So again, going back to, as you mentioned, saying, well, is upskilling, embrace the culture of learning, and then start building product as you learn to help, customers and the enterprise around the world to say, hey, this is the right way to implement AI. And, I'd be, I mean, I mean, I can't predict the future, neither none of us, but I can tell you the pace of innovation that we've seen in the last couple of years. I won't be surprised if we're harnessing power from space in next decade, right? And that's again through the evolution of AI, because systems becoming so smart that we can, now we can build propulsion systems to, take us to the next frontier, which obviously was humanly impossible, right? And that's a whole different domain in terms of like what AI is capable of, right? So perhaps some other time we can discuss that too. But if we embrace a learning culture, I mean that's the start.
So, innovation wise, space is where frontier is at this point, because we have seen everything from the bottom of the ocean, from any part of the round globe that we live in. The space is the next frontier, and we're talking about quantum computing. We're talking about creating a bridge towards that frontier, because that's how you end up going into that frontier and live there, right? You create a bridge. St. Louis Bridge, the arch, and the Mississippi River. That's what it meant. Once you created that bridge, the West became United States, right? So this bridge that we're creating is based on an educated population,
Mhm.
and this educated population needs advocates, right?
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about the advocates that we have in hand: cybersecurity experts, finance expert, cloud expert, data expert, and overall just Gerard,
Yeah.
brain trust.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a little bit of who we are, and
Yeah.
what are we bringing to the table in order to make this happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I think you summarized it pretty well. We're still in, what I call in process of building and maturing in terms of our own offering, and it all starts with, as I mentioned, we're just learning by looking at what customers are asking. But we do have a roster full of folks that have deep domain expertise. To your point, we have cyber experts, that look at the permutations or implementations of generative AI. They look at from that lens and help us help customers how to adapt to it. We have financial experts, CFO, our own CFO, who's done, sort of like these, what I call, either you can call it merger and acquisitions or you can call it integrations, even being a financial guy. He has a deep expertise or a lens looking at how these disruptive technologies can impact ROIs, right? So helping, the likes, sort of profiles or C-level executives, he's playing a pivotal part in that. And then, again, you're part of Action AI. You're bringing in deep expertise in data realm and AI realm of things. And then, as you mentioned, Gerard, and I have a few other folks in sort of the advisory board or strategic partners to us that are, cumulative. I mean, we're talking about this is like they have 100+ years of experience. It's hard to put that on a piece of paper and try to, come around and try to explain how one can say we have 100+ years of experience. But if you look at and talk to these folks, it exudes out of their personality, right? So these guys are coming, if you look at our strategic board, Gerard, Nancy, here, the folks, they have this sort of transformational journey experience over the last 30 plus, which is over 3 decades, to help organizations expand in the realm of new technology. Well, we are in the realm of new technology. So they're here on our board to help us, our company as an XGen, to put ourselves in the shoes of customer, look at from their lens, and also guide us what can be potential, pitfalls and pivots. So again, it's a great starting. We're excited on this journey. We hope to get our customer excited about this too. Generative AI is here. It's been here. Now let's embrace it. Let's make our processes efficient. Let's make our day-to-day interaction efficient. And really, let's go conquer the world.
Yeah, beautifully put. Beautifully put. So, I don't think I have much to say other than say, ay, 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 ay. New frontier, baby.
There you go. Ay,
Indeed,
ay, ay!
indeed, indeed. No, it's been a pleasure speaking with both of you.
Thank you, Naz. Thank you all for listening in. Tune into another episode of Ay, 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 ay next week.